Thank you, Charles. Good evening. It's so good to see you here. Glad you came. How many of you know the story of David and Goliath? Wow, a room full of Bible scholars here. Okay. Now, who's the underdog in that story? Okay, we've got a mixed reaction there. Okay. How do we usually use the expression a David and Goliath story or a David and Goliath situation? What do we mean by the use of the expression David and Goliath? What are we describing? I like that, Robin. Thank you. Success through improbable circumstances. Little guy wins. The classic stereotypical explanation. Thank you, Glenn. Giant gets stoned. I can't hear you, Burmy. Against all odds. The power of God in a sling. Abundant faith in the Lord. That's good. Those are all good answers. I think most of them are wrong, but today I'd like to take a fresh look at the story of David and Goliath and see what we can learn, what we can realize today in our lives and in our congregations from the inspired story of David and Goliath. Now, first of all, the story is found in 1 Samuel 17. So if you have a Bible, an iPhone, an iPad, a Kindle, whatever you use these days, you might want to start looking for 1 Samuel 17. The book of 1 Samuel is located in a section of the canon known as the former prophets. And a problem with the former prophets is there are lots of textual variants and anachronisms present. The Masoretic text, that's the Jewish text, the varieties of the Septuagint version, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and Josephus all disagree as to exactly the wording and the way. In fact, there are almost two different stories of David and Goliath when you look at all the manuscripts. But guess what? Be relieved and be at peace. None of those things will matter for the purpose of our story this evening. We're going to follow the NIV and mention only those variants which relate directly to our story. Now, if you know the book of 1 Samuel, it deals with the problem of the leadership of God's people. Remember, we started with the judges. God appointed judges to rule his people, and they were more like almost independent tribes, and each tribe had a judge, and it was not quite a cohesive nation or group of people yet. And then from the judges, you also had the prophets. So you move from people like Eli to Samuel to Saul, the first king, a monarchy, and then to David, and of course the Davidic line, which would lead to the Messiah, one day, Jesus Christ, the King of Kings. Now, as the leadership moved from like Eli to Samuel to Saul to David, I don't know if you know, but other things were happening. Geographically, the leadership moved from north to south. From Eli and Shiloh, where the sanctuary was at that time in Ephraim, to Samuel, then to Saul in the land of Benjamin, and then finally to David of Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Now, if you haven't realized that before, that's leadership. Not only the leadership is moving south, but God's presence is moving south. So the presence of God moves south with the leadership from Shiloh and the shrine there to eventually the temple in Jerusalem. 1 Samuel shows God at work among and through his people to advance his plan for the salvation of all humanity in the Messiah through the lineage of David to Jesus Christ, the true King. And 1 Samuel 17 takes place approximately the second half of the 11th century BC. That's the background of our story. Now, let's pick up our story in 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel 17, verse 1. Now the Philistines, okay, let's stop right there. We've gone far enough. You know me well enough to know we don't get very far. Now, who were the Philistines? The Philistines were a seafaring people, believed to have come originally from Crete, so they were kind of a Grecian, Greco background. They came from Crete, and they sailed to the coastal areas of Canaan, and they settled on the coast. They were seafarers. Were the Hebraic Israelite people seafarers? No, because in their view of cosmology, there were several places you did not want to go, and one of them was the sea. So you've got seafaring people versus landlubbers. You've got the seafaring people, obviously, on the coast, and you've got the landlubbers inland in the hills and the mountains of Judea. There were 5 city-states of the Philistines. One of the largest and most powerful was called Gath. The Philistines were Israel's most dangerous enemy up until the time of David and Hezekiah, a warlike people. All right, so back to chapter 17, verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Socoh in Judah. They're coming up the coast from the south of Saul's encampment, and where most of the people were there. So if you can imagine Saul and his armies coming down from northern Palestine and the Philistines coming in from the coast from the south. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah. Elah is a Hebraic word, translated, of course, into English as Elah, commonly known in Greek as terebinth. And they say, well, that clears that up. Boy, now it's terebinth. Of course, you've probably heard an English word we get from that. Turpentine. Turpentine. The terebinth is a tree, a member of the cashew and pistachio tree family, I'm told. And so there was one giant terebinth tree in the valley, and a few others, but it kind of got the name the Valley of Elah, or the Valley of Terebinth. And they drew up their lines there to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill to the south, and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. You got that picture? Army on one hill, valley, army on the other hill. Let's look at some slides, if we can see the slides now. Okay. Wish we could make it bigger, at least for my eyes. But that gives you a general idea. If you see the little arrow in the blue printing, the Valley of Elah, in the region of the Levant known as the Shephelah. Now, the Shephelah region is strategically important because it's been a site of many of the major wars in that area, starting with David and Goliath, practically, but then moving forward to the time of the Maccabees, and then even up into the Crusaders beating the Islamic armies. They met in this valley. So the valley has great significance militarily and strategically, and many great battles have been fought there over time. All right, let's look at the next slide if we can. Oh, here we got David and Goliath. Now, if you're interested, the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena has probably more David and Goliath paintings than any other museum in the world. And if you've never been over to Pasadena and seen those, you really ought to go over and take a look at them. This one is from there. And, of course, this depiction is totally wrong. Let's see the next slide. Another great famous painting. Again, totally wrong. Okay, let's see the next slide. This one's more accurate. Got David chopping off Goliath's head. And you can buy this in the Norton Simon gift shop, at least a reproduction of this you can. So let's see if we got one more slide. That's it? Okay. All right. So I give you a little bit of idea. But now let's get back to our picture of an army on a hill, a valley in between, another army on the other side. Now, let's just think about that for a moment. Oh, okay. There we go. I knew there was one more slide. Right? There you get the Valley of Elah, and you see Saul's camp and Socoh in Judah, the creek, and Ephes Damim, where the Philistines' camp was. And you see they're both on hills, and see that Valley of Elah in between them. And then you see the Sharim Road where the Philistines fled. Gives you a little bit of flavor of the topography of the area. Now, if you're an army on one hill and there's an army on another hill, which army is going to march down the hill first? The stupid army. Because when you start going down the hill and into the valley and the other army is still up on the hill, you're in big trouble. So you can understand there's a bit of a stalemate here, right? Neither one wants to go into the valley. They both want to stay on the hills. So we come to verse 4. Oh, I should mention, too, that the Valley of Elah is about 18 miles southwest of Jerusalem, just to give you a little bit of logistics. And there's a trail right from the Valley of Elah. Guess where it goes? A convenient, easy-to-travel trail directly to Bethlehem and into Jerusalem. So if you control this valley, you pretty much have taken Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Now remember, Jerusalem was not the capital at this time. The capital was still up north in Benjamin under Saul. But still, it would have been a strategic thing for the Philistines to get to Jerusalem. So Saul came down to stop them. Verse 4, a champion named Goliath. Now this word champion is interesting in the Greek and in its origin. It's debatable as to what it exactly means. It literally means an in-between man. And it came to mean an infantryman. But an in-between man would be the one who would go down and stand in between two armies and fight in like single combat. So this is what Goliath was. He was trained to do this specific job. A champion named Goliath who was from Gath. And he came out of the Philistine ranks, or the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. How big is that? Well, now, the Masoretic text, that's the Jewish text, has 4 cubits and a span. The varieties of the Septuagint have 6 cubits, and I think that Josephus tends to agree with the Masoretic text of 4 and some others. But here's the difference. We're talking about a man who was either 6 feet 9 inches tall or a man who was 9 feet 9 inches tall. 9 of one, 9 of the other, whatever. He's a big man. Remember, Saul was head and shoulders above every man in Israel, and Saul was scared. So however tall Goliath was, he was an imposing figure, be he 6'9" or be he 9'9". He was an unusually tall man for his time period. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. You know what scale armor is? You can imagine like a fish. You got layer on top of layer on top of layer so that it moves and it's flexible, but it's very, very sturdy, hard to penetrate. Weighing 5,000 shekels. That's 58 kilograms. For you Americans, that's 125 pounds. Can you imagine wearing armor that weighs 125 pounds and trying to move in it? Gives you an idea of his strength. On his legs, he wore bronze greaves. And if you don't know what that is, it's the bronze coverings that protect the legs and then go out over the feet. And a bronze javelin. Actually, the Greek there, according to the Septuagint, is scimitar. So a bronze javelin or scimitar was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod. That's a pretty big spear. I mean, most of us could not get our hands around it to use it. And its iron point weighed 600 shekels. That's 15 pounds. 16.9 kilograms. Can you imagine 15 pounds at the end of your stick? How much that whole thing had to weigh and how much strength it would take to use these devices. So what have we learned about Goliath so far? He's big. Very good. Very well summed up. I told you you're theological scholars here. He's big. And he's strong. He's 6'9", he's big, and he is strong. Then it adds, his shield bearer went ahead of him. Why? If I were Seinfeld, I'd say, what's with that? Why would a shield bearer go in front of this man carrying his shield? Any ideas? I'm open to suggestions. What was it? Goliath told him, and he said, yes, sir. Carry my shield, son. Why would a person have a shield bearer? For protection from arrows. Yeah, very good. Usually arrows. Did Goliath really think the Israelites were going to shoot arrows at him down there? That would have negated the whole thing, and so maybe not. But why would this shield bearer go out in front of him? Why? Can you imagine what Goliath's shield must have looked like? And can you imagine this little kid from Gath carrying Goliath's shield out in front of him into battle? And all of Goliath's armament, his 3 weapons, take what? Where is he going to hold them? In his hands. No room for the shield. What's the role of the shield bearer? I just keep that in mind. Just asking a question. What is this shield bearer doing here? This is very strange, I think. Verse 8. Goliath stood. See, I'm amazed at it. What, was he sitting down? Was he lying down? I don't know. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, why do you come out and line up for battle? Then I'm translating this from the original Philistine as I go. Am I not Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us. Then the Philistine said, this day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified and wept like little girls. I added that part. What's with this? Saul is head and shoulders above every man in Israel. He's no slouch, you know. He's a warrior king. And all the valiant warriors of Israel, and Goliath bellows this out down in the valley, and according to our storyteller, they were all terrified. Now, maybe he's just a good storyteller, but let's just assume he knows what he's talking about here. What is the single greatest, most frequent command that Jesus gave to his disciples according to the 4 Gospels? Anybody know? Fear not. Hello! The first thing Jesus had to tell his disciples over and over was fear not. Now, I would argue there are things you ought to be afraid of. But there are other things you ought not be afraid of and not let your fears get control of you. I mean, we call it phobias. We call it psychoses. We call people being neurotic and having mental illnesses because of fear. Fear can do some terrible things to you. And yet, I'm told, I've read this, that 365 times in the Bible, that's one for every day of the year, 365 times in the Bible tells us the Word of God to His people is, don't be afraid. Fear not. What's the opposite of fear? Confidence? Faith? Courage. I like all those. Very good. But you notice the opposite to fear. And one of them is faith. And another is courage. And we know the story of David. What is David going to display? confidence and courage and faith. He is. There's a lesson for us, folks. A lesson for us here. There are theological and practical lessons from this great story. So they were afraid. Verse 12. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Notice that's important because who's going to come from Bethlehem? Jesus, the Messiah, son of David. Bethlehem is important in this story because if Goliath wins, the next stop of the Philistine army is Bethlehem. And all history, as we know it, would have been changed. Moot point, didn't happen, but the potential was there. Jesse had 8 sons, or 7, depending on which manuscript you read. Now, I like 7 because the 7th son, that's where the origin, the 7th son. David was the 7th son. Well, some manuscripts he's 8. Jesse had 7 or 8 sons. And in Saul's time, he was very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second, Abinadab, the third, Shammah. David was the youngest. And again, we go back to what did we say? Least likely, the youngest of all the sons of Jesse. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So he was a shepherd. He was a good shepherd. He was the father of Jesus. He was the good shepherd. He was the king. He fought giants. He went out into the wilderness. And for how many days did Goliath come down and challenge Israel? Take a wild guess. 40. For 40 days he taunted, tempted, and tested the Israelites. And it was David who stepped forward to resist him. Any parallels there you can think of? We see some interesting, I think, allegorical, admittedly, but parallels here in this story. So the 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. Verse 16, for 40 days, period of time, testing, trial, for 40 days, and just study all the 40s in the Bible sometime. That's an interesting little numerical study of the literary purpose of the number 40 in biblical imagery. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. What's interesting about coming forth every morning and evening? What was the Jewish custom and practice every morning and every evening? Prayer. So while they were trying to pray, Goliath came out and yelled at them. Verse 17, now Jesse said to his son David, take this ephah of roasted grain, that's about 36 pounds. That's a little load to carry, isn't it? And these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of the... Now I'm thinking, where's he putting all this? And how's he... I'm already getting uncomfortable, thinking about how to carry all of this, but David takes off with it. See how your brothers are. Bring back some assurance, some token, some pledge from them. They are with Saul and all, I love it twice now, he said, all the men of Israel. All the men of Israel. All, now I don't know how literally to take that, but what about Jesse? Why is Jesse not there? He's very old. Why is David not there? He's not a man. So they are all with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines. Really? 40 days have gone by and there's been no fighting. Just a lot of knee shaking and teeth chattering. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle position, shouting the war cry. I don't know, that strikes me funny. Every morning, hoorah, 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 hoorah. Okay, we've done enough. Let's go back now. We went out, we shouted, now let's go back to the tents because nothing's happening. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. Ooh. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Again, our storyteller emphasizes fear. Now, the Israelites had been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He keeps coming out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughters in marriage. And will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. Now you're talking. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Does David have a different approach to this? He may be a boy, but he's already said this is not about just national honor. For David, this is a matter of God. We're the people of God. He can't defy God like this. Verse 27, they repeated to him what they'd been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him, brothers, and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Wow, this is David's older brother. And this is what he thinks of David. Do you think that he had any validity in his statements? Don't know. I always thought about James, the Lord's brother. You know, James never believed in Jesus during his entire earthly life. When did his brother James begin to believe in Jesus as Lord and God? When he saw him raised from the dead. That's when I would believe my brother was somebody. When he comes back from the dead, I'm now okay. Up until then, So I'm wondering, familiarity breeds contempt. Maybe David had some, he was a kid. He was impetuous. We see here, man, he's fearless, and he's kind of a strong personality. So I'm wondering, maybe there was some bit of truth in what his older brother had to say about his punk younger brother. At least from his perspective, I don't know. But I'm just struck by, I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. And yet, what does the New Testament say about David as it quotes, as Luke, a man after God's own heart? Wow, these are two different perspectives of David, aren't they? Interesting. David, typical. Can't you just see David as I don't know how old he was, late teenage, I don't know, maybe early 20s, but let's say he's late teenager. I love this line, verse 20. Now what have I done? Can't catch a break, man. Now what have I done, said David. Can't I even speak? He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the man answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. That's interesting and impressive. Verse 32, David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Now, what were Saul and all the men of Israel doing during this time? And David goes, let no one lose heart. Translated, fear not. Thank you. Fear not. Don't be afraid. I'll go and fight him. Saul replied, you're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. You know, I would have said, adios. We got more sheep. They got one me, got lots of sheep. That's not David. When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it and struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. Wow. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair and struck it and killed it. This kid kills lions and bears. Wow. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. You hear any fear? What do you hear? Faith, courage, confidence. In whom? In God. Did he have any confidence in himself? I think so. He could kill a lion, doggone. You kill a lion? How many lions you killed lately? You kill any bears? I run from rabbits. I don't know about you. They might be rabbit, man. I'm not taking any chances. Lions and bears. So David went into this whole episode with absolutely no training, correct? No. He went into this with no skills, correct? No. No experience. No. No preparation. No. And here's a key point I want to make for us. I think we really need to think about. Who did he give the credit to? God. But did he do nothing? He trained. He had experience. He had skills. He had a lot going for him when he went into this, but he also trusted God. So many times I find in Christian circles, even in our own midst, that we tend to think dualistically. It's either or. It's either you fully trust in God and you do nothing. And you hear the expression, Jesus has done it all, so I don't need to do anything. Or you say, it all depends on me. Folks, if you get nothing out of this message tonight other than this, please get this. It is not either or. It is and. I love our friend Elmer Collier says, it takes 100% of God and 100% of you. It's all God. And it's a whole lot of you too. Because God doesn't need us. But he wants us. You know, the whole concept to me, and I'm sure to you too, of the Trinity, of what we might call in the fancy Greek term perichoresis, the perichoretic union of the community and intimacy of God. Does the Father and the Son and the Spirit participate with each other in anything? If we are to enter into their life and their love, what does that call upon us to be like? Participants. How do humans participate with the great triune God? Faith. I would say that, everything we do is an act of participation. Why do you think God made everything he made? So that we could, as Tom Torrance uses the term, scaffolding. We need scaffolding to get on and use to get at the building of God. We participate. Why do you pray? Does God need to hear your prayers? then why do you pray? Why do you sing praises? Why do we worship? Why do we do almost anything that we do that God doesn't need? It's a part of the participatory relationship of love and communion that we have with God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and with each other. I was thinking recently, I know that comes as a shock to some, but I was thinking recently about the miracles in the Bible. And, God did a lot of miracles, and almost every one of the miracles that I could think of, He asked people to do something along with the miracle. And then sometimes He did a miracle and asked for a response from someone because of the miracle. God does miracles, but when He does miracles, He says, hey, now here's what I want you to do to be a part of this miracle. And when I do this miracle, now here's what I want you to do in response to this miracle. I want participation. Now, I know that participation and perichoresis are not synonyms, but I find a similarity. I find a relationality. I find that God wants us with Him and Him with us. And that when we participate with God, we become one with God. And when we participate with Jesus Christ, we become one with Jesus, for we are one body, one spirit, one baptism, one hope, one body. But we are one body, and we are one in Him and He in us. I would argue significantly through our participation, our scaffolding, in which we encounter on a human level and a physical level that which is divine and beyond human and beyond physical. I'll try to come back to that as we go through our story here. So David had experience. David had training. David had practice. David had experienced success. And past successes gave him confidence of future successes. That's important. But notice who he gives the credit to. Verse 37, the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. What's that? Faith, confidence, courage, but above all, faith, trust, belief, a lack of fear. A lack of fear because of trust in God. Have you ever noticed how fear just like puts your feet in concrete? And how it just binds you up? And we'd like to do, have you ever been in class and you knew the answer to a question and then you maybe I don't, and if I don't I'll look stupid. And you didn't, and then some stupid kid next to you said, oh yeah, way to go, Johnny. You were. Fear just blocks you and binds you up and keeps you from participating. I have no doubt why Jesus said, fear not, and why the Bible says so many times, be not afraid. Because when you're afraid, you lose trust in God. You lose your faith, and you're not participating with Him the way you could be participating with Him. Just a thought. So he said, He will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. I'll be here in the tent if you need me. Verse 38, then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. And remember how big Saul is. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. And David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. That was not his style, not his fighting style. Now, there are some assumptions here. Think about the assumptions. Goliath goes down into the valley dressed like what? A warrior. An infantryman. And actually the armor, according to scholars, is Greco-Roman armor, which is completely anachronistic to the period here that we're dealing with. Never mind. The point is that what kind of battle was Goliath expecting? Sword fight. Mano y mano. And I'm big, and I'm strong, and I got giant weapons. You don't have a chance. What is Saul? thinking about the battle? The same thing. The same thing. Yeah, we got to go down there and stand. You know, it reminds me, I don't know if you remember the old Bill Cosby routine back when Bill Cosby was starting out about if the Revolutionary War were fought like a football game and there was a coin toss. And then the coin toss, the British lost. He said, well, the British lose. The Patriots will be receiving. The British must stand in a line in bright red coats in plain view. The Patriots will stand behind trees in green outfits and hide in ditches and shoot from behind stuff. Okay. Saul was anticipating this single combat, 2 men in armor, up close and personal, fighting it out. Let's see what happens. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Good move. Then he took a staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones. Does anybody know why he chose 5 smooth stones? He had 4 brothers. I heard that. He had 4 brothers. And in case one didn't work, I think is also a correct answer. But for the sake of the storytelling, I like the one Goliath had 4 brothers. I got 5 rocks. Anybody else want to come at me? So he chose 5 smooth stones from the stream. Now, what's interesting is in the stream that you maybe saw in the picture there that flows through this valley, the rocks there are made of barium sulfate, which has a mass density twice that of most rocks. This is some heavy-duty ammunition David is loading up with. Do you think David realized that? Now, I know I'm reading between the lines, but I kind of suspect he knew what he was doing. So he put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. Have any of you ever done any reading about slings? In the ancient armies up through the Middle Ages, there were slingers. They were like the long-range artillery. They were so accurate that it was said that Irish slingers could take a bird in flight out of the air, that they could hit a coin as far away as they could see one, that they were accurate up to a distance of 200 yards. This is no little kid's slingshot. This is a major military device, a weapon of mass destruction. And slingers were very effective against, guess what branch of the other army? The infantry. Why would a slinger have an advantage over an infantryman? Yeah, the infantryman's there. Okay, let's fight. And the slinger's like, let's see, I'm 200 yards from you. According to ballistics experts, a stone from a sling, when correctly thrown at a distance of 100 yards or less, had the impact of a .45 caliber handgun. Wow. That's pretty potent. That is pretty potent. So when David faced Goliath, it reminds me, do you remember the scene from the Indiana Jones movie? Where the guy comes up and Indiana Jones is in the alleyway and there's no way out. The guy takes his scimitar and he's twirling it around every which way, so you get ready. And Indiana Jones pulls out his gun and goes, bang. Moving on. This is what happened here. Goliath is standing down there with all his armor on. He can barely move, waiting for someone to come in and fight him. And David is who knows how far away. He could have gotten easily within 35 yards and hit him with a Colt 45 between the eyes. Who's the underdog in this story? Goliath was a dead man when he walked into the valley that day. He just didn't know it. In fact, he should have seen it coming. He should have seen it coming. Adds another little wrinkle to our story. Let's continue. Oh, while I think of it, let me just throw this in. Do you notice that David didn't say, well, I'm a evangelical fundamentalist Bible-believing Christian, and I believe in faith alone. I don't need no stinking strategy. I don't need no plan. I don't need no programs. I'm just going to go down there in front of Goliath and pray to the Lord. The story would have ended differently. Notice that one does not preclude the other. That total faith and confidence in God does not preclude, take a rock with you. Go prepared. Go trained. Go with a plan. Go with a strategy. And trust the Lord. It is not either or. Very important principle to learn. Because to participate with God in this, David needed a sling and a stick and a rock. If he had just gone and knelt down and prayed, it would not have been the same level of participation, of communion with God and what God was planning to do. My argument, and I'll defend it. Okay, Goliath should have seen this coming. Why didn't he? Well, let's look at verse 41. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, there's that shield bearer again, kept coming closer to David. So David's over here. Let's imagine 35 yards away. And Goliath is there. And he keeps coming closer and closer. And finally, he looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. David was healthy. And Goliath despised him for it. Do you get a picture here of this man who keeps walking closer to this fellow walking so that he can see him? He should have seen it coming, but he didn't see it. Next we read, he said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" Now, it's the Masoretic text that gives us the plural, sticks. The Septuagint varieties have sticks. So there's an interesting book. I don't know if you've seen it. It's worth a read. It's called David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. I've met Malcolm Gladwell. He's a very fine Christian man. And one chapter in this is devoted to David and Goliath. And I must admit that as much as I like Malcolm, he cherry picks his texts and things to proof text his argument. But lay that aside. It's a good read. But he just goes with sticks. And I'm okay going with sticks, but I'll tell you honestly that there are plenty of manuscripts that have it in the singular. So anyway, let's assume it's sticks. Let's go with that argument. Why would Goliath look at David's staff and go, "You come at me with sticks"? What would you surmise from that? Couldn't see very well. Double vision, maybe. Depending on which manuscript you like to cherry pick and use for your proof text. Could have been. Well, no matter which manuscript you go with, he didn't see the sling. Not good. If Goliath had seen the sling, I would have think he would have gone, Uh-oh. Nice meeting you. I'm out of here. Because everyone knew the deadly force of a sling. So he didn't see the sling. So we don't have to battle manuscripts to get at least at that possible point. And then I'm going to skip ahead to verse 44 to look at the verb there. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the wild animals. He's already up staring at him. And then he says, come here. You know, there are three kinds of drunks. You know that, right? There are the angry drunks. There are the friendly, lovey-dovey drunks. And there are the come heres. They're the worst. Come here. Goliath was a come here. Why did Goliath say to him, come here? Come here. Because I can't get over there to where you are. I'm going to kill you. You're going to have to come up and stand right in front of me so I can do it. I can't go traipsing over there to get you. Now, there's another possibility. And this goes back to a 1960 study done by actually some medical doctors and printed in the Journal of Medicine, Iowa State Journal of Medicine. And again, this is just speculation, but it's kind of fun. I throw it out in the spirit of fun, not in the spirit of sound exegesis, but in the sound of fun. So here's what they said, and I'll quote Malcolm Gladwell on this. What many medical experts now believe, in fact, is that Goliath had a serious medical condition. He looks and sounds like someone suffering from what is called acromegaly, a disease caused by a benign tumor of the pituitary gland. The tumor causes an overproduction of human growth hormone, which would explain Goliath's extraordinary size. And furthermore, one of the common side effects of acromegaly is vision problems. Pituitary tumors can grow to the point where they compress the nerves leading to the eyes, with the result that people with acromegaly often suffer from severely restricted sight and diplopia, or double vision. What was that shield bearer doing there? He was his guide dog, leading him down into the valley and leading him to battle, but carrying his shield so as not to embarrass him. Now, again, you can't say that's true, but that's just kind of an interesting sidelight. But I think there is enough exegetical evidence to say that Goliath was dead as soon as he set foot in that valley. As soon as David came on the scene, David was the overmatched, total hero, total dominant champion, and Goliath is a serious underdog who's as good as dead. He never had a chance. Now let me go back to the line where it says, and the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Who were the gods of the Philistines? Dagon, chiefly. And you've got Baal and Astarte. Do anybody remember earlier in 1 Samuel chapter 5 what happened to Dagon? Yeah, exactly, Robin. Dagon did what? When they stole the ark and God told the Philistines he was not pleased with them, what happened to the statue of their great god Dagon? He fell forward on his face. So are you ready for what's about to happen? Goliath should have known that. And Goliath should have been prepared to kiss dirt, because he was about to go down just like his god Dagon. So he cursed him by his gods, and he fell on his face just like his gods. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord God Almighty and a sling and 5 rocks. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and wild animals. And, listen to this, church, the whole world. As our storyteller trying to tell us something in the words of David? The whole world, not just Israelites, Jews, but the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. So as the Philistine moved closer, how close is he trying to get to attack him? David ran quickly. Hello, he's not carrying 250 pounds of armor. He can move quickly. Ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. Anything strike you as unusual about that? Exactly. You guys are smart. Yes, he should have fallen over backwards, because when something with that impact and that velocity hits you in the head, you stagger backwards and fall over backwards, but Goliath didn't. Why? I heard a good comment. Say it louder for everyone. Not worshipful. Not. Try to see where it's going. Yeah. I don't know if it's storytelling. I'm not saying this isn't true, but I say good storytelling is good truth-telling. To have him fall on his face like Dagon, I think it's just a beautiful piece of irony. Now, some Jews argue actually the rock fell down into his greaves and tripped him on the back of the leg, and he said, you can read explanations of this galore. I like mine, of course. And mine is, it's the irony of Dagon falling and Goliath, who called upon Dagon, falling face down. It makes a better story. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword, drew it from the sheath, and he killed him, cut off his head with a sword. And when the Philistines saw their hero was dead, they turned and ran, and now who's afraid? Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath, and the dead were strewn, and the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camp. So what do we learn from this story? Well, one, there are many things. We learned that Bethlehem was saved, that Saul is not qualified to be king, that David is God's chosen, obviously, God's anointed. It's clear that the rightful ruler of God's people should be David, the Davidic king, because David fears not. David is a man of faith and a man of courage and a man of God. And it is from him that a great man of courage and of faith named Jesus, who will also be tempted and tried for 40 days and stand against the powerful evil of the devil and triumph when he's almost dead from hunger. Who's the underdog in that story? So we learn a number of lessons. Facing overwhelming odds and winning produces greatness. Don't we all love that story? It changes people. You begin to realize the impossible is possible. And sometimes with God, it's not only possible, it's likely. This story is a guide for facing giants. Because power is not just in physical might. Power is in courage and in faith. There is power in faith. And there is weakness in fear when that faith is in God. And there is strategy and faith and participation. It's not just God and it's not just us. It's God with us as one. That's how things are done. I'd like for us to take just a moment, and I won't go on any longer, but I want us to take just for a moment for you in silent prayer. Now, if you want to pray with someone next to you, that's fine too. But if you want to pray silently, do that. Would you imagine, what giants are you facing? What giants are you facing? We're all facing some giants, folks. I know that. Whether that giant be cancer, whether that giant be finances, whether that giant might be a marriage in trouble, whether that giant might be a lost child, or that giant might be anything. What is your giant that you're facing? And your congregation, is it small? Is it elderly? Is it dwindling? Is it financially impaired? What giant is your congregation facing? Let's just take a moment to pray about our giants and ask God to give us the courage and the faith to participate with Him, to make those giants the underdogs and the losers, and us little Davids, the heroes and the winners. Let's pray for just a minute, silently or together as a couple. If you can just change your prayer a little bit now and ask God to show you what your strengths are against these giants. Ask God to show you what should be your strategy. Ask God to show you your rock and your sling. And now as we wrap up and come to a conclusion, let's understand, maybe I hope a fresh way, the story of David and Goliath, and may it mean something to us as it's never meant to us before. May we fear not. May we trust God. May we have faith in our lives and go forward against any giant. And by the power of the Almighty, the God of Israel, let's watch those giants fall. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.